Добрий день.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us. It's Olga Atamanova, and Ukrainian Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. It's day 246 of heroic resistance of Ukrainian people, and now we will talk about the nuclear safety in our country. I want to introduce our speaker. It's Oleh Korikov, acting chairman, chief state inspector for nuclear and radiation safety of Ukraine. Mr. Oleh, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Let's start with this subject. Let's talk about the condition of the safety. How do you estimate it and what's going on in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant? In fact, Ukraine, from the point of view of the use of the nuclear power, is one of the first countries in the world. The nuclear power plants operating in Ukraine, along with other nuclear facilities like processing facilities, which convert the radioactive ore to the nuclear fuel. We have 15 acting operating power plants. We have Chernobyl power plant operating. We have storage of nuclear fuel waste, the storage of the sources of ionic radiation, and other facilities involved in the radiation, so to say, industry. I'm talking about the facilities involved in non-destructive testing, and all of these facilities were designed and are now operating with account of the peacetime to provide the necessary degree of service to produce electric power, and they were not designed for the operation during wartime as per their project documentation on the stage of its approval in terms of consistency and security of components, because now it can be physically damaged. Talking about the physical nuclear security, like capturing of Ukrainian territories and capturing of nuclear power plant. In case of Zaporizhia power plant, the shelling of Kharkiv nuclear plant, the infringement of a physical protection regime. The goal of physical protection is to ensure the regime which would provide access to the nuclear power plant only for the persons who contribute to the safe and secure operation of this facility. Unfortunately, now in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, we have very dire infringement of this security regulations. And also there is a breakdown of the logistic chains, because now the delivery of the components and parts is complicated or impossible. The requirements of the repair are not fulfilled. Also in the captured facility, there is impossible pressure on the personnel who is being forced to do different things they're not supposed to do, and I can go on and on. So we are in the risk zone, and we have to do everything that we can to liberate our land from the occupants. So we need to ensure proper deoccupation, demilitarization, and return of the nuclear power plant under control of Ukrainian government. Mr. Oleh, we're into, it's been already 9 months of the Russian aggression, and Russian aggressor all the time tries to use the nuclear blackmailing, and all Russian propaganda media, they started spreading the new narrative about the so-called dirty bomb that we keep hearing from the representatives of the government and from the propaganda loudspeakers. What is this narrative spread for? Let's talk more about the instruments that we propose to solve to counter this narrative, to neutralize it. So to say, we know that we invited IAEA mission here. How should it be happening, and what's the mission should confirm, and what conclusions should they come to? Yes, there is a fake information about the so-called dirty bomb, and I want to emphasize that IAEA already made their statement as to this fake information. Mariano Grossi promulgated his statement that two enterprises mentioned in those statements are the objects of annual visits by IAEA, and they are under IAEA guarantees. Moreover, about a month ago, these facilities were last inspected, and the inspection results were satisfactory. No unreported activities were identified, which would not have complied with the report submitted by Ukraine to IAEA. At the same time, we invited the inspection, the IAEA inspection, and shortly this issue will be coordinated. We will agree on the members of the team, and the mission is about to come shortly, and they will draw up their report. But I'm personally convinced that we are 100% transparent and we are absolutely open. So please, within the short-term perspective, we await for them to come. All right, let's maybe clarify a little bit to those who hear and see us. Why is it impossible in principle for Ukraine to use some nuclear waste? Because we understand that there is very strict control of this nuclear waste. How does it disable such type of use, and how can we neutralize this narrative in this way? Ukraine complies with its obligations as per the agreement on non-promulgation, and in compliance to this agreement, we inform IAEA about our nuclear materials and intentions with the regard of this material, on the technologies used on these or that nuclear facilities under guarantees. And we are open to, so to say, IAEA visits. We can provide the additional access and unprepared inspections as well. We maintain proper documenting and records of radiation sources, and this information is readily available for IAEA and any operations with the nuclear materials. Any information of such kind is being reported first on the intentions and the actual activities themselves, and IAEA visits Ukraine on a regular basis to verify these activities. As to the nuclear power plants, there is a system in place for online monitoring of the condition of the nuclear materials, the availability of seals and plumbing, and to prevent any unsanctioned access to those areas. And IAEA headquarters receive relevant signal and thus the compliance by Ukraine of the guarantee agreement is being controlled by IAEA, and there is no misunderstanding between us. Dear colleagues, your questions, please. Good afternoon, Andrei Svetina, USF Inform. Don't you think the capturing of these nuclear facilities in Ukraine, that these acts are based on the religious fanaticism among Russian top government authorities like Putin and Medvedev praying in the church? Is it in fact really possible to blow up the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and in this way destroy half of Ukraine and contaminate Europe? Thank you for the question. It's the first time in the history when we have this instance of a nuclear terrorism, when the enemy captures nuclear facilities in Ukraine. I would like to remind you that we had a case of capturing of Chernobyl exclusion zone, where we currently have 3 power blocks and 2 storage facilities. Waste processing facility, the confinement object. It was a huge hazard, and for a long time those installations were cut from power supply, and the system of radiation control was out of operation. Fortunately, there was no concrete damage to the objects, to the sources of radiation hazard, but now the infrastructure is damaged and it's difficult to reestablish proper operation of those facilities. Those enterprises had their license suspended, which is currently being renewed, but it caused significant complications in the exclusion zone. Now the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is captured, and it has nothing in common with the compliance with the radiation and nuclear safety and security measures. In fact, in the halls, workshops of the first and second energetic blocks, the occupants brought their military personnel and material to those facilities. In fact, the physical access is being controlled by the occupants, and no one with intentions other or anybody with intentions other than ensuring the nuclear safety and security has access, which poses a significant risk factor for everybody. Now we're having unsanctioned construction works in the fuel waste storage facility, which is in the territory of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. This construction work is in no way sanctioned, and it infringes, on one hand, our agreements between Ukraine and IAEA, because it's the change of the technology of the nuclear power plant, which we had to justify and properly ground to bring relevant drafts, blueprints to IAEA, but in fact this is done to occupants, and there is an internationally recognized approach to modification of the nuclear power plants that first, before any amendments or modifications or changes, they should lead to improvement of safety and security, and there is no proper justification that we're seeing now. And the key point is that Ukrainian personnel doesn't even have access to that construction site, so no one can tell what exactly is going on there. Even notwithstanding the fact that Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, due to occupation, turned from one of the most powerful producers of electric energy now the power plant takes the electric power from the grid just to maintain its systems operable, to cover the excess of thermal power produced by the reactors. And even under these conditions, the number of operational events grew thrice comparing to the same period of the last year and the year before. So these are the consequences we're facing now after capturing our nuclear facilities by the occupants. Again, it has nothing to do with the safety and security, and the only option to return to the safe and secure condition for our nuclear facilities is deoccupation and demilitarization, and returning them under full control of Ukrainian government. Thank you. We have more questions, please. Victoria Nakonechna, Ukrinform. In conversations with the international partners, Herman Halushenko, the Minister of Energy, and Mr. Halushenko, they bring up the topic of Rosatom, because this is the organization who sends their representatives to Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and they try to take it under their control. Is there any response from international partners to our calls on imposing sanctions on Rosatom? Thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to start with the fact that from the vantage point of nuclear safety and security, we're integrated into the progressive world. There is a community, the so to say nuclear community, and starting from the very first days of this active phase of war, we are consistently in touch with our colleagues, and respectively our European colleagues, Great Britain, Canada, United States, and a large number of other Western countries. They consistently support Ukraine, and relevant resolutions. I will remind you about 3 resolutions. First of all, the board of directors of IAEA met several times, and they've taken resolutions that stipulated that the things happening in Zaporizhia NPP has nothing to do with nuclear safety and security, or that Russia infringed international conventions, the Statute of United Nations. And from the point of view of the resolution, which contains the call to Russian Federation to stop all activities in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and to get out of not only Zaporizhia NPP, but from Ukraine in general. There are also relevant resolutions and declarations and statements by G7 that Russia should return full control of Zaporizhia power plant to Ukraine, to the sovereign owner. There is also respective voting by the United Nations member states during the 11th session of General Assembly of United Nations, with the call to Russia to withdraw its forces from Ukraine in internationally recognized borders. So the civilized world supports Ukraine. As to Rosatom specifically, relevant documents and arguments are being handed by the Cabinet of Ministers. In reality, unfortunately, Rosatom continues their international activities, and this is the issue which we address on a permanent basis, and we keep communicating it to our international partners. Ministry of Foreign Affairs does a lot of work in this regard, and their relevant steps are being taken by the Ukrainian team. That's the answer to your question. Thank you. We have another question, please.
With the New York Times. You just two things quickly. You mentioned the construction going on in Zaporizhia secretly at the dry storage facility. Can you go into any more detail about what you know about what they're doing there, and have the IAEA monitors who are there been able to assess what the Russians are doing in that area? And secondly, on Rosatom, why do you think it is that the international community has been reluctant to take more aggressive action, sanctions, or other things on Rosatom? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Не буду українською. Стосовно будівництва несанкціоновано на Запорізькій АЕС, так.
As to the unsanctioned construction on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, we have quite limited information about these construction activities, and we submitted necessary application to IAEA. There is a permanent IAEA mission operating in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and one of the steps taken, we organized we established permanent communication, consistent communication with the inspectors who are currently located in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And this question you asked, we keep discussing this question with our colleagues from IAEA so that they could get access to those construction sites, and we get more recent and actual information about these construction works. As to your second question, I'm not a diplomat. Why this section against Rosatom are in more, I would say, political and diplomatic dimension. I'm a nuclear power engineer, but what I'm thinking, I can share my opinion with you. First of all, international institutions like IAEA, United Nations, they're created and they were established on a basis of consensus. When, for example, during any discussion, everybody votes for, and the discussion of any decision is going on like statement by statement, and it's like labor costly. And if one country, so to say, it has partners, I mean like a country which is a member of United States Security Council. But this is question more to like politicians, lawyers, and diplomats. Dear friends, any more questions? Thank you. No more questions. I want to thank you for joining our discussion. I will remind you we had Oleh Korikov with us. He's the active chairman of Держатомрегулювання, Nuclear Safety and Security Regulation Agency. I will remind you we're preparing our schedule for tomorrow. Please follow our announcements. Glory to Ukraine.